In our first episode, we talked about the basics of financial planning and what that process looks like with Lise Allin. Now we're actually going to talk about retirement planning, estate planning, and the transfer of wealth. So if you're close to 55, this is an episode you definitely want to tune into. All right, Lise, you ready?
I sure am.
You're born ready. So, that's a leading question.
Thank you. Your point is well taken. If you're 55, we really need to be doing some active planning. Many people do a lot of things right. Just sort of subconsciously, they sign up for their pension, they do some RRSPs to pay taxes. They might not necessarily have a financial plan to do that. Maybe they say yes to an insurance person and have some permanent insurance. They miraculously get their kids through and settled in jobs. But at 55, it's more about them and their financial plan rather than their dependents, not so much on their dependents. If they're lucky, their little eagles have flown, have settled into the economy in a job of their choice, and now they really need to focus on their own wealth. So when someone comes in for a financial plan as they approach their 50s, or maybe they're in retirement and they want an opinion to know if they're doing it right, we do a financial plan that's tailored to them. With all the things we talked about in the first meeting, we help them get organized. We take stock of all their investments and some debt. If they have debt still, I would say a third of our clients go into retirement with no debt. Mm-hmm. 2/3 take debt with them. Okay. And it's really about packaging that debt to make sure that it still works. We determine any goals they have in retirement. Do they want to travel? Do they want a cottage? Where are the children? Do they want to move closer to the children or further away? We set targets for what we want their wealth to be. In the olden days, there's an old school way of doing financial planning, which is you build the wealth, and then the advisor would say, your life expectancy, if you're male, is 81, and if you're female, it's 83. So what we want to do is have most of that money, make sure that it goes the distance. So with that approach, you're sort of approaching your 80s and you're spending your last dollars. We don't do it that way. Mm. What we like to do is build the wealth, maintain the wealth. Think of the wealth as the golden goose. Think of the eggs as what you spend. Mm. We do not want to be snipping those golden wings off the goose or the beak or the legs. We keep the golden goose intact. That's your capital. The eggs is what we can spend them all every month. There's more being laid next month. So we don't know how long a client can live. We have many clients that live into their 90s. Seniors are between 80 and 100. We've had a few clients over age 100, the centenarians. We need that money to last. Even if they don't need it in their early retirement, their late 50s, their 60s and 70s, because they have their health and they can do a lot of things for themselves with their homes and travel. They have agency. They don't know if they're going to be frail physically or mentally in their senior years. So we need that golden goose, even if it's providing things like travel and fun and maybe being a bit generous to the grandkids in their early senior years, their junior senior years. We may need those eggs to pay for long-term care. Yeah. We may need, if they want to stay in their homes, think staff. So we need those staff salaries paid for that. So we will not be eroding that wealth in our plan. The children and the grandkids can have it when you're finished with it. So it's a bit of a different approach that we have, the creation and preservation of wealth until you're finished with it. Can we give the kids some money? Yeah, a little bit, but you can't give away large chunks of money while you're in retirement because you might need it.
But so true, though.
You can't get it back.
You can't get it back. I mean, this is one of the things that I'm facing with, clients who are older is people saying, oh, I need to get a reverse mortgage now because I don't, where's the money coming from? And I mean, the program works for different people for different reasons, but I do think it's important to say, let me have choice at least to start with what I want.
Exactly.
So this conversation is so important because, in our earlier conversation when we talked about, hey, most people don't start planning until they're 49. So actually that's quite good for most people. What's the ideal? But hey, here's what's the reality.
Exactly.
And now when we're looking at people who are 55 and older, saying, okay, we've got to get active and we've got to get real and make sure you're taken care of until the end.
That's right. We need to figure out what wealth they do have, set those targets that we don't want the wealth to go below a certain amount. Even if they have real estate, they might not want to monetize that real estate. They don't want to necessarily sell it and move it into long-term care. They'd rather be looked after in their home if the home is set up for them.
Yes.
Or they might want to change their home, live in the big, beautiful home in the country with the stairs and, the 3 acres of grass to cut while you're in your junior, senior. But if there's only one of you in your senior years, maybe move closer to the kids, maybe get a condo over a green space or over water, and be in a home that you can stay in, even if you become frail physically.
Absolutely. And I actually appreciate this conversation because I'm also seeing more of a move towards intergenerational living, as well as people thinking about aging in place and what that looks like, right? And how to modify renovations or in the home.
Quite so.
That will allow someone to age in place and they don't have to move.
The other thing is when people get older, if they start to become a little bit forgetful, being able to stay in their same home with that picture on the wall, and this is where the bathroom is really important because it's an anchor for their memory. Yeah. And that could help them live maybe a little more independently for longer, which is what we would all hope for ourselves and for our parents and grandparents.
Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate that so much because this is a part of the reason why there's so many people who are reluctant to leave, and they might be in a 4-bedroom house, but they're really only occupying the first level at this point, and they're trying to renovate it so they have to stay on the first floor.
That's right. Yeah.
This conversation is so important, and I'm grateful that we're having it.
Good. So we take stock of what their assets are. Sometimes they're getting pressure from their kids to sell and downsize, and one of the couple won't entertain the conversation. So once we've done the financial plan, gathered the data, set the goals, had a separate meeting to look at their options to preserve the wealth, look at types of investments that are appropriate, that aren't too risky, maybe put guarantees on the capital, have them think about it, and then start implementing it, setting the targets so their wealth doesn't go below a certain point. Then we look at where do you want to live? Is this your destination? Is this your forever home? I just adopted some rescue animals who found their forever home with me. It's the same thing with people in retirement. Their forever home for them. Is this your, oh yes, we love living here. So what if you couldn't live there? Oh, we would just stay here forever. Well, let's make a plan B in case it's not possible. For example, if I become frail physically, I've always been very strong physically and mentally, but what if I became physically frail? I could still stay in my home because I can direct it. I can talk, I can say what my needs are, I can tell them what I like dietarily, I have income. But what if I became frail mentally? We're not staying in our homes if we become frail mentally. It's not safe for us, and it's not safe for our family. And what if I became frail mentally and I became aggressive? I don't want someone coming into my home and me barking at them when I'm old. I will be going into a long-term care facility. If that happened, which ones do I like? Well, I've made the rounds of long-term care. I know the ones I'd go into and the ones I wouldn't. My family knows too. Plan A is I stay in my home. If I become physically frail, I hire staff. Yeah. But it's not my kids holding the bedpan, it's staff. If I become frail mentally, I need to be open to the fact that don't want me wandering around outside in my house coat in a snowstorm, or the kids worrying about that. Yeah. You can't keep someone in. You just cannot. They find a way to get out. So we say, absolutely. Door number 1, there's only 4 things that can happen, 4 doors. Number 1, I and my partner live happily ever after. We have good health. We have mental acuity. We hold hands and we pass away in a warm bed. 2 heart attacks at age 96. The death we wished for. Unlikely, but that's what everybody hopes for. And then people start nodding in our meetings. You're right. That is what we want. Is it going to happen? Statistically unlikely. One of us will be left. And they sort of look at each other.
Who's it going to be?
Who's it going to be? And then they start joking and it's fun. But at least we've opened the door to the conversation. The second thing is one of us dies. So what happens to the survivor? Have we protected her? Have we protected him income-wise? And if we talk about it now with both of you here, both of you healthy, both of you with your marbles. Even if it's a tough conversation, we're not doing it for 5 or 10 years, but we're going to talk about it in our financial planning meetings. So you have a plan B. I've had clients where the husband has died suddenly, and I sit down with the wife and said, remember when we talked? Here's what you and he decided you would do. You're going to stay in your home for a couple of years, and then you're going to look at these options. She's like, yep, he and I talked about this. I didn't want to do it, but we talked about it. If you haven't talked about it, it's really hard on the surviving spouse.
Yeah.
It's really hard. So you could live happily ever after, die in a warm bed at the same time. Not going to happen, likely. Number 2, one of you could die and one of you is left behind. We need to make sure the money works, because when one of the partner dies, what dies with them? If it's not 100% survivor pension, part of the pension dies. Old age security dies. Canada pension dies and you get a partial CPP back, and you want to make sure all the investments are connected. And you want to make sure we've done a migration program from all of the RRSPs and RIFs over a 10 or a 15-year plan into tax-free savings. So when the RIFs are done, you turn the income on tax-free from the TFSA, and that $14,000 in personal tax deductions on the other person's income that you lose when they die, you make up with tax-free income from the tax-free investment plan. So I don't like TFSAs to be used for short-term savings at the bank. I want them to be part of a long-term savings plan in retirement. So we talk about that. So we could both live happily ever after. One of us could die. One of us could become disabled. Who's going to be carrying the bedpan? Please don't make it your spouse. It's going to be hard enough for them organizing stuff. Think staff. And one of the things you might want to think about, who does all the outside work? He goes, I do. Who does all the inside work and the housekeeping? She says, I do. It's a typical division of labor. Well, what if you can't? There's nobody that's going to get those cuts on the lawn lined up like he does. But that's okay. Get used to it and have someone help you with the spring and fall cleanup with the leaves and the trees.
Yeah.
Just so you're used to it instead of you heroically having to do it all yourself. Ditto the housework. If one of the partners does all the housework, get someone in once a year for spring cleaning.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, quarterly. And then as you get older, monthly. So you're used to having Frida come in and help someone that you trust, someone you can trust with uncounted money. So it's not all on you. And you can stay in your home. If you don't have staff when you get old, you will make a flying leap from your independent home into long-term care. You will not have an apartment or a senior's residence or a condo because you never permitted people to help you. So we become one of the crabby people that went from their homes in a 5-point harness into long-term care. And we do not want that path. So we could live happily ever after. One of us could die. One of us could become disabled, in which case we're going to have staff, or you could quit. There are divorces that happen in retirement. If you have an aggressive relationship in retirement, you don't have to divorce, but I sure wouldn't live together. It's not safe. It's not safe. You can leave all the assets. I've done it. I call it married living apart. You can live in different homes. There's enough money for both. Still leave it to each other and then down to the kids.
Yeah.
But not if you're being aggressive with each other. If you're not, carry on. But we have different needs at different stages. Let's go back to the wealth. So we have this golden goose that we $500,000, $1 million, 200,000, 2 million, whatever it is. We want to keep that there. And at 5%, you know roughly what you can pull off in addition to your pensions. Most people have loved ones, whether it's children or favorite nieces and nephews, or a charity that they like, or the Humane Society or something like that. Where do you want the money to go when you're finished with it? Most people think they're not going to care. You always care. You've built up this. You can do a lot of good with that.
Yeah.
I had one very interesting situation in Kingston where this couple did not live together. He did not trust banks. She was my client. For 30 years, I had her as my client. It was a romance when they were young. And then he had gone out west. She married someone else, had a child, then divorced. He came back and lived down the street. Did not like banks. He bought gold bricks and bars and coins.
Okay.
And she looked after it all. And he started filling up his house. He had a map in his house and her house about where he had all the gold. So when I would go and visit this house, it's surreal. It was totally real. So when I would come, she said, remember, after he died, She said, remember when you were at my kitchen table? We had some of those boxes at your feet. I had no idea. She never told me till after he passed away. But when he passed away, he left. He ended up having medically assisted dying. He had a condition. So he and she planned. He said, I want to go out of the world naked and penniless the same way I came in. And so he wasn't able to give it all away, but he gave most of it away. And she and he had a lot of fun pretending to be a fly on the wall when this one gets that gold brick. I'm like, that is so,
I love that. That's a cool story.
Amazing. Not common. But even if your gold bricks are normalized in your financial plan or your investment portfolio with your bank or with your mutual fund person or with your independent financial advisor like I am, or with your stockbroker, you want it to go somewhere once you're finished. Presumably you want it to go to your partner, to him or her, when you pass away, and you want it to go as efficiently as possible. So one of the things I do in the net worth statement is I say, how is it owned? So if it's a registered investment, you name a beneficiary. If it's a life insurance investment, you name a beneficiary. It passes outside of the will, no fees, no probate, no delays. If you own the house jointly, ditto. You just take the other person's name off with the death certificate. You have the house, doesn't have to go through probate. Anything that's an open portfolio or an expensive car or collection that's not owned jointly, you might want to change that.
All right, to make it jointly.
To make it joint, or make it so that it passes without that. So you know that you want to, if you're partners, you want to protect your partner. You want to make sure that you are protected. So when you pass away, there's no delays. It's not expensive. There's no erosion of the money. It just goes to your partner who you love and want to protect. At the second death, you should have talked about it before the first one passed away. So you get agreement like, where do we want our money to go? If you have children, it normally goes to the children, normally in an equal split. Might be a little bit different if one of them has a special need or something like that. You might set up a Hanson trust or a trust or something like that. But if you have 2 kids, 50-50. You have 3 kids, 33 and a third, 33 and a third, 34. Big jokes of the one they love best. If you have no children, there might be a favorite charity that you like, or a distant cousin, or someone back in England that you want. And you need to make sure your wills are up to date, see your legal advisor for that, name your beneficiaries and talk to your financial advisor. And then whoever is going to be your executor needs a copy of the will. And as we get older, please make it transparent about what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a number of properties and they're all stocked with furniture, fortunately, we're past the time where your kids have to spend 2 years boxing that stuff up that nobody wants, because their taste is different. There are wonderful companies there that will do that for a fee. It's so worth the money.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you interviewed somebody
that
did that. Yeah.
Downsizing Diva.
That's right. So that they don't have to be inhaling the dust and packing up those boxes.
Yeah.
But there will be someone that you want, and you can structure your affairs so it goes to that institution or to that person with a minimum of fuss. Charitable giving through the use of giving a charity an asset is becoming more and more common. If you have a favorite university, or let's assume you have some land and you don't want it developed. One of my clients who was very interested in making sure that we had enough sanctuary land on the planet. Attenborough has
I love it.
Has a letter to the world, and I would like to see between 40 and 50% of the world protected in sanctuaries. The oceans, where I think Attenborough said there's 6% of the oceans protected now and 15% of the land. It's pretty low with the rate of development.
Yeah.
So as they allowed more density in the cities, it can protect the lands. But she said one of the best ways to protect that cottage or that hunting camp or those 100 acres you have north of Marmora is to use it and care for it. And when you're finished with it, if someone else isn't going to use it and care for it that donate it to the Nature Conservancy or similar group so it can be preserved and made into a sanctuary for all time. If more people did that, that would certainly help with many things. But there will be monetized assets that you want to leave as well. Usually pension assets go to the spouse or partner, or if you don't have a spouse or partner or they've predeceased you, there's a period of years, 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years, the balance of, that you can send it to your nephew or your son or your daughter. So make sure those beneficiaries are named. On your RRSPs and your house, through your will, you would leave your house to your two cousins or whatever. But do make sure that people know where you want those assets to go. The older you get, the stronger will be your feelings. If you don't have it set up, it's going to be very expensive. The taxes will be higher and the delays will be longer. And that's really too bad when you've built these assets.
Yeah.
So you can plan for that preservation of wealth till the end of time. And then what happens to that pizza of investments, the real estate, the RRSPs, the RIFs, the TFSAs, the stock portfolio, your life insurance, that sort of thing. I want to talk a little bit about charitable giving. I have a charitable giving portfolio separate from my 3 companies and my assets and buildings and stuff like that. And what I did was when I was younger, I'm a financial advisor trainer. So I've trained probably over 50 financial advisors in my day.
Yeah.
And I always started them off to see if it was their cup of tea by doing this account executive school on Saturday mornings, 4 of them. I'd bring them in and put them through their paces. One morning I showed up at the office around 8:30. I have a Victorian building in Belleville. That's my office. And this guy was sitting on my step and he had fallen and there was the reek of alcohol. And I'm like, this is not good. So I said, do you need some help? And he said, no, I just need to sit here. He wasn't hurting anybody. He had a cut, he'd fallen. And so I went inside and I called the police and I said, there's a guy on my front steps. He looks like he needs help. Can you help him? They said, we can come and arrest him, ma'am. I said, he's not hurting anything. No. He said, well, if he gives you trouble, you call us back. We'll take care of it.
Right.
Okay, no, don't need that. So then I called my church at the time and I said, there's a guy on my front steps. He looks like he's had a bit of a fall and had a tough night. Can you come and help him? No, we're not set up for that. And then I called another church, same thing. We're not set up for that. Then I called, forget who else I called. Then I ended up calling the Salvation Army. And they said, yep, we'll be there. We'll send a car around. They were there in 5 minutes in their uniforms. They had some soup. They had a blanket. They had a Band-Aid. And I'm like, wow, the only one who would pick up the people who'd fallen down in the street was that one. I couldn't find anyone else to do it.
Yeah.
So I decided I would leave them $50,000. I was only 33 years old. A $50,000 life insurance policy on my life cost me $39 a month.
Yeah.
So step 1, I bought the policy, made my estate the beneficiary. Step 2, I called the Salvation Army and said, I want to give you a life insurance policy when I do pass away. I mean, I won't be like George Burns, who was not when he's going to die. It's if he's going to die because he lived and lived and lived. But someday I will pass away. So I turned the policy over to the ownership of them. I continue and have continued to pay the premiums, $39 a month, over the last 4 decades. The policy has grown from $50,000 to I think $120,000. They're the beneficiary. I got a tax deduction from my little $39 a month all these years. When I pass away, they get their $125,000 tax-free. My family doesn't even think it's real money. It's nothing to do. It doesn't come out of the other pot.
Yeah.
It comes out of the insurance pot, which is surreal to them. So I thought that's pretty cool. So I was telling my minister who wouldn't send anyone to help. And he goes, where's ours? Crap. So I did a $50,000 policy for my church. Did the same thing. I get a tax deduction from them. When I die, they get 50. Then I had a couple of incidences health-wise where Belleville General Hospital saved my life. So I thought they should have some money. But meanwhile, I would been building some properties. I'm going to have this capital gain on my estate. So I bought a $250,000 policy on my life. I think it was like $100 a month or something, and made them the beneficiary of it. But I did not transfer the ownership. So I don't get a tax deduction for that $100 a month. But when I die, they get $250,000. My estate gets the $250,000 charitable receipt, which they will need to offset the capital gains tax. So that worked. And then a couple of years ago, I've been adopting these rescue dogs. I did a little $50,000 policy for the Humane Society. Same thing. I've made them the beneficiary, but I don't get the tax deduction. And of course, I was older when I got it. So for that little $50,000 policy, it cost me $165 a month.
Okay.
So it's about $2,000 a year to leave them $50,000. But I don't have to pay it for 40 years unless I live to 100 plus. So they'll get that. And again, that $50,000 tax deduction will come back to my estate. So I was trying to get my insurance portfolio up to about $500,000. I think I will.
This is your life insurance.
My life insurance, yeah. So my life insurance I had when my kids were gone, I had, term insurance, a couple $1 million. And then once they're grown, I don't need that anymore. So you fold that down.
Okay.
But your permanent insurance is what is actually in effect when you die. The term insurance is not expensive. You need piles of it when the kids are little.
Yeah.
And your debts are big and your wealth is not built. Permanent insurance is what's actually in place when I die. For my charities, for my capital gains tax, for my executor, for my children, to conserve my estate if I built one.
Okay, so I need to break that down. So when you buy the insurance for when you're older, it covers. So if you died, that's what you'll get. Like you're paying $165 and you get $50,000 on your life insurance,
right?
And that money will go to
whoever
the charity, whoever you set as the beneficiary,
yeah.
And so you get a tax deduction against.
You either get the tax deduction for the premium, or you get the tax deduction for the death benefit. You choose. What are you going to need? So if you have, Toronto General Hospital that's dear to, or Mount Sinai, or someone that's dear to your heart, and you want to leave them $100,000 and you're 40 years old, that's not expensive. You put that policy in place. You might need that tax deduction. So if it costs you $88 a month, a little bit over $1,000 a year, that's useful on your income tax.
Yes.
If you're in a 30% tax bracket, that's $300 back to you on your income tax each year.
That. I get, okay. Yeah.
It's very cool. So you can either have the tax deduction for your premium, in which case you write it up, make your estate as the beneficiary, step one. Then you contact the charity, give them the policy. They've got the forms. They take over the ownership of the policy. You keep the premium coming out of your bank account.
Right. And that's a write-off.
At the end of the year, the insurance company tells them, yeah, she paid that $1,003. They send me a charitable donation. They make themselves the beneficiary and they just wait. When is she going to leave the planet so we can have our money? And you will not believe the Christmas cards I've gotten from the Salvation Army for the past 40 years.
I didn't even I understand that theoretically, but that really is helpful.
So if you're young and you have a favorite charity, I've probably done a couple of dozen charitable policies for young people that have a charity that they care about.
Yeah.
Older people, the insurance gets expensive. That $50,000 that I bought for the Salvation Army when I was 33, $39 a month. Yeah. That $50,000 I bought for the Humane Society a few years ago in my 60s, $165 a month. And I pay that premium until I die.
Okay, so my mind is like, oh, this is really awesome because
buy it when you're young.
Yeah, well, I didn't even think about that as an option because usually for me, I always do a charitable donation. Every time I'm successful in something, it is me giving back.
Me too. Yeah.
But this actually makes more sense because
but if you have a favorite one. Now, if you don't have a favorite, keep doing what you're doing. But if you have a favorite, like your synagogue or your church or the Nature Conservancy or the Humane Society or the whatever.
Yeah.
It's really neat. Or like Wendo or women's shelters, the specific one. You can make a bequest. Now, the very fun thing is my name is up on the board for Belleville General Hospital Foundation. I haven't given them the money yet. I haven't died. I'm still here. But it's in there's all these ladders of gifts. And I'm up there and why am I there? Oh yeah, because when I die, they'll get that $250,000.
Now I totally understand that because and so that's really cool because now I can have a plan where I take out a policy and I instead of paying $100 a month or something, directly to the charity.
Mm-hmm. You have a multiply effect.
I'll have a multiplier effect where if I just pay $100 for this whatever term, they'll get a bigger chunk.
That's
and I'm still making the same donation.
And I sound like the sham wow guy, but wait, there's more. You don't have to do a life pay policy.
Yeah.
You can do, the insurance companies now will allow you to pay for it and get it all paid for over 20 years. Costs a little bit more, but then the premium's done. And the policy sits there in my life insurance portfolio. I don't have to pay anything after I'm retired. And then when I die, there you go. She was a great old gal, wasn't she?
I love that.
I know.
No, because I'm always I kind of choose different charities to support, but this actually has
you can still do that.
Ladder.
You can still do that.
It.
Yeah,
okay.
You can still
My
do
mom's
that.
going to love this.
For sure.
Because it's always about giving.
That's right. But you usually choose a charity that's still going to be around. Like the Salvation Army will be around for 200 years after I'm gone. Hopefully that we have a planet. Same thing with the hospitals.
Yeah.
And so like there's something like 18,000 little charities across Canada. If you get the little textbook on which ones are legit.
Yeah.
But people have things that are dear to their heart.
Cool.
Because something interesting has happened to them, or they've noticed altruism. They've noticed philanthropy and they go, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So you can do that in your portfolio for very little money. You can do a $25,000 policy to your favorite whatever. You know
I love
what
it. I like
Not
it's
expensive.
totally like shifted giving. And
The other thing you can do is if you have no children and no nearest and dearest, you can carve off part of your estate. Leave your RRSPs. Like, if someone has 400,000 in RRSPs and they're 80, they're going to have a big tax bill.
Yeah.
When they pass away, they could leave that RIF to the charity of their choice, and then get an offsetting tax receipt, which covers the tax that otherwise would have been paid.
Yeah.
So
this is something that you are always thinking about, is how to
Yeah.
leverage your money and maximize
That's
it.
right. And what do people want? It comes back to the goals of what do you value?
Yeah.
You value your family? Let's protect them. You value yourself? Let's make sure that you're not old and poor.
Yeah.
You have health concerns, they run in your family, we need to look at the disability portfolio. So all of these come out in the goal setting of the financial plan and need to be reviewed regularly. So you still want to do that? I had a woman that inherited $2 million from her mom. She already had $2 million in her portfolio. So her priority was her 7 grandchildren. She wanted to send them to private school. So we put the $2 million into a trust.
Yeah.
We managed the money, the trust managed it, and they sent the $25,000 a year times the 7 grandkids from the growth and a little bit of capital erosion. Kids all got through university. And at the end of it, she had married and sort of had a messy divorce 8 years later. So of her $2 million of her own, she had to part with about $600,000 because she didn't have a prenup. And so after the kids were all through university, she said, what about the trust? I said, you're the director of the trust. Do whatever you like. She said, well, the kids are through. Like I validated what I wanted to do for my 7 grandkids. I said, you can fold it and take the money back to your own portfolio. That's what I want to do. And she did. That was cool. That was pretty cool. It's her money.
So that's like transfer of wealth.
Transfer of wealth. There are instruments that you can transfer wealth into, and it will pass to the beneficiaries of that instrument. Cottages. Let's talk about cottages.
Yes.
I have a lawyer friend named Leonard, and his plan for cottages is, I have a plan, burn it.
Okay.
So you don't have a fight with the kids.
Yeah.
But there are better plans. So one of the things you can do is have the cottage when the kids are young. They grow up with a cottage. Yes. They go off into the world. You don't need it anymore. You sell it. You bring the money back into your portfolio. Have a nice day. It's hard to do that if the kids are emotionally attached to the cottage.
So true.
So option number 2 is you gift or sell the cottage to one of the kids. What do you do with the other kids? That's tough. So if you have enough assets, you don't want to have it, Dawn gets the farm, Fred gets the cottage, and Sheila gets the dishes. You don't want that, right? You want it to be equal. You can equalize it up with life insurance.
Yeah.
So Dawn gets the farm, Fred gets the cottage, and Sheila gets the dishes and $1 million of life insurance. That's fine. Yeah. It doesn't have to be exactly equal, but it has to be fair.
Yeah.
It has to be fair. You can roll the cottage into a trust. If you have directors that'll keep the cottage going a couple of generations, you have to be careful because every 21 years, there's a deemed disposition on the trust. You got to pay the capital gains tax. How are you going to do that? Well, you could sell off lots if you have enough land. Then you sort of get the cottage smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
You can put a mortgage on it. Who wants to do that? You can save up. Well, that's tough because you're trying to keep the cottage maintained. You can buy life insurance on the next generation. That's what the Kennedys and the Cretchens and the Rockefellers do. Little babies born into it, put $1 million on their life insurance. It costs peanuts. It might be $49 a month to have that $1 million of permanent.
Yeah.
Because they're little. They got 80 years before they're going to pass away.
Yeah.
And it'll build. And then every 21 years, there's insurance money coming. So you can continue to clear whatever debt you needed to pay the capital gains tax and keep the cottage in the family. But it takes planning.
Yeah.
The Japanese have a saying. They say, if you have a 5-year business plan, that's good. If you have a 25-year business plan, that's great. If you have a 100-year business plan, that's genius. And it's true. And what we need to do is get people thinking long-term. Begin with the end in sight and work backwards.
Yeah.
My family, my mother ran her corporation till she was in her mid-80s. My grandmother ran their corporation till they were in their mid-80s. I probably will too. So I'm not thinking that I'm going to pass away next year. I might. I have lots of life insurance in my companies and my charitable givings if I do. But what if I'm still here?
Yeah.
If I'm still here, what do I want to have happen?
Yeah.
So you plan for the best and you prepare for the worst. You protect the people you love, protect the wealth, get it set up properly with your legal instruments. So you need your lawyer that you like and who gets you. You need your banker for those mortgages.
Yeah.
If you want to do stocks, you can do them yourself, or you can do them with a trusted advisor at one of the big stock brokerage firms. But whatever you need, think about what you'd like. Start with a basic financial plan and then reach out to the other advisors.
Yeah.
And your financial advisor, if he or she is good, will stay in their lane. They'll say, this is my area of expertise. Here is where we need to get more expertise. I'm not going to pretend I'm a mortgage broker or a real estate agent or legal advice. The financial planning is what the advisor should do. And that starts with the goals.
Yeah.
Tell me about the little red car at the beginning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, okay, I think when we first started talking, 49 being the age that most people start saving up
Correct,
for,
yeah.
We've talked about like people like from your home and then going to long-term care. I mean, the reality is the cost of long-term care can vary drastically. And for staff, it's a lot.
Yeah. So it depends on the long-term care. So there's independent living in your big home.
Yes.
There's independent living in your property-sized bungalow. There's independent living in your condo over a green space or your apartment if you like it. Then there are seniors' residences with varying levels of care. That is the very expensive phase. Seniors' residences.
Yes, they're very expensive.
Long-term care, which is basic care, is not that expensive. And a lot of it's paid by the province. The problem is it's basic. So if you want long-term care that's of a higher quality,
yes,
where you're going to have people checking on you when I can only eat beverages through a straw, if they're understaffed, I'm going to be waiting 4 or 5 hours to get a drink. That's not cool.
No.
You need to make sure. So you need to think of long-term care at a higher quality.
Yeah.
So you need to preserve those assets. And there are long-term care policies you can put in place. You probably want to put those in place between the ages of 40 and 55 because they get very expensive when you put them in place. 60 or 70 or 80, it's too expensive.
Yeah.
You pretty well have to self-fund.
Well, this is why having a conversation with a professional for financial planning makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But again, people will also say, this is how long my family lived. They sort of have an expectation that they'll live about as long, unless there is poor nutrition, their parents or grandparents, or smoking, or some other illness or something that shortens a lifespan. But even diabetes. Like I have a friend who got type 1 diabetes when she was 7, and she's in her 70s now. And she went through many periods of denial in her life when she's a teenager. I can eat what I want. So she learned over time.
Yeah.
So you can manage a lot of healthcare.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you need money. You need money as well.
Well, this is why I'm so appreciative of you taking the time to talk about it, because it demystifies money and it demystifies having that conversation about this is what I have, because the guilt or the shame of I don't think I have enough. I think most people probably think they don't have enough. And that Scotiabank ad, you're richer than you think. Yeah. I see that again and again in my financial plans. It's so interesting. People are actually richer than they think. Give me an example. Used to be you need $1 million to retire. And my clients would come in and say, I don't know if I'm ever going to make that. And I said, well, you need capitalized assets worth $1 million. For example, if your Canada pension is $1,000 a month, that's worth $250,000 of that $1 million you need. Okay.
If your old age security gives you $500 a month, that's $100,000 worth of capital of that $1 million that you need. So if you only have OAS and CPP, it's like having capital of $350,000 of that $1 million you need. So size up your assets. What is my income producing asset and how much do I get? Then we do the budget. You need $4,000 a month or $7,000 a month or $12,000 a month or whatever it is, depending on if you're living in a little village with no debt. or if you're living in downtown Toronto, you still have a mortgage, it's a different amount. And then we line up all the assets and say, what do we get from each one?
Yes.
Because my goal is whatever the net income was before retirement, I want that same net income for them after retirement. Then they know they have enough.
Yeah.
Especially if the capital does not diminish.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that, because I think a lot of people, there are many people who I know who are reliant on their OAS and the CPP and those things, and would be like, well, it's $500. What is that? That's,
They have to live with their family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And have the plans in place that are realistic.
That's right. I had one real estate agent that I had years ago who had a wonderful marriage. She had a wonderful marriage for 40 years, produced 4 children, and then he died. She thought that's what marriage was. So within about 5 years, she'd married her neighbor. It was a terrible marriage. She didn't know that's what she might get. She didn't, she thought he would be just like her husband. That's what marriage is. He was very controlling. She said that she did end up leaving him, but she had never worked, so she didn't have any money. She went into real estate. She sold real estate for 20 years, bought herself a little condo, got it paid off, and then went into retirement. And then she wanted to leave assets to her children, so she was going to leave her condo. But I said, what about creating some life insurance? So at age 70, she bought a $50,000 life insurance policy, and she said, I'd really like to have this to leave to my 4 children. And no, $200,000. She's going to leave $50,000 to each one. And I said, it's a little pricey for you to pay. How about if we get the children to kick in? Are we allowed? Of course we are. Let's find out how they think. It turns out her daughter wasn't that well-to-do, but the son said, hey, we'll kick in. We'll do a 4-way split on the insurance. So that's what they did.
Yeah.
The kids carried the life insurance, except for the daughter who couldn't really afford it. And they each got another $50,000 when mom passed away later. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, I love that. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk about that, because it gives us the insight into different ways of doing things.
Exactly right.
So, well, okay. So I think we've covered a lot, and it's a lot for people to, process. And then you can rewatch this as many times as you want, because it's really sage advice and good.
And the takeaways are everybody's financial plan is unique. There are many, many financial advisors out there. Interview them.
Yeah.
Take that project on, call them, go to their website and say, I would like to have a chat about you becoming my financial advisor. Let's see if there's a fit. All of them should do that first interview for free.
Yeah.
No matter how they're paid.
Absolutely.
And take their measure and see if there's a fit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then people do much better with a financial planning coach than they do on their own, even if they manage a lot of their own wealth themselves, because there are things people don't think about.
Oh, no, 100%. Look, in my business, it's the same thing, right? Like when people are like, oh, I read enough like things on the news about real estate. I'm like,
I would never buy a house without a real estate agent.
Like, it's not quite the same thing. Like the intelligence that you have is, coming through the lens of whoever's writing it, and on the ground, it's different, a little bit different, right? And
for sure.
So I have really developed a respect for like, this is my lane. This is what I know. This is your lane. This is what you know. And it's the shortcuts. You make it easy because you actually know it. Right. So I appreciate that. And I value that knowledge. One of the things that I always ask is a quote to end on. And so, I love your quote, and I'm going to share it and love you to talk a little bit about why this is a favorite quote for you. If you don't make time for the things you want in your life, you will be forced to make time for the things in life that you don't want.
That is so true. Whether it's saving for a house, or looking after your health, preparing for retirement, or having those conversations with your spouse that if you can't live in this house, where would we live? And if you make a plan and you've considered plan A, B, and C, it's more motivating for you to put the time into doing the homework. I guess I call it homework.
Yeah.
To get the things that you really value.
Yeah. It's just being intentional, right? Like, and being
Very
like,
much so.
Because if you don't have a goal, someone's going to have another plan for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, you are amazing. I can attest to that. And thank you so much for your time.
You are so kind. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.